We're ready to start. Welcome everybody to the Jackson Wild Action Coalition Forum, Stay Healthy, Be Green, which ORF and we at Terramata Factual Studios are sponsoring and facilitating. And the Jackson Wild team and us have been meeting for the past 2 months, speaking with lots of people to talk about green producing in our genre, but also in film production generally, especially as the topic and many green guidelines are there already for many years, like over more than 10 years, but we're still not at a point at which the whole film industry is contributing to this all. Although climate change is progressing in a fast pace, and it's important that we all take action. So now is the time to present and discuss some of these actions and what we're calling on you to do moving forward. For this, we have invited some really exciting guests who have been involved in green filmmaking for a while already, and which I'm looking forward to welcome to this panel later on. To start, I want to introduce myself and also the green initiatives at Terramata Factual Studios. So my name is Nina Holle, and starting with this year, I took on the role as Sustainability Manager next to my work as Production Coordinator at Terramata. So we started to build up a sustainability strategy for our company, and with Corona hitting Austria, unfortunately by March, and being in lockdown for a while, there was just a minor setback, but we kept on working on our regulations and the calculations of our CO2 footprint, as well as getting the whole team on board. And also because we really think it's important that Corona shouldn't bring a backfall for the greater movement of making our industry more sustainable and also getting closer to the worldwide goals of reducing emissions. For our 10-year anniversary in 2021, we are planning to release these guidelines. And at the same time, we also have to plan to implement a CO2 calculator into our production workflow. While doing all of this, we found a companion with ORF, having the mutual goal to go through with the green initiatives together and hopefully find further national and international partners. Which brings me to my co-host for tonight, or today, whichever time zone you are in, Thomas Matzek from my ORF. I'm really excited to lead you all through this 1-hour session together with him.
Hi, Nina. Thank you very much for this great introduction. Hello, everybody. We are really happy to have you here in our audience and that you join us at Jackson Wild. Thank you to Lisa and her team for this fantastic job to bring in this festival alive with digital means. This year has been very special. But anyway, as Nina put it out, there is no setback in our efforts to produce and work in a way that will take care for our planet. So at ORF, which is the Austrian public broadcaster, social responsibility is one of its key elements. And I'm head of factual and a lot of science programming and also nature wildlife film in my department. And so, of course, it's very natural that we deal with the topic of green producing because we are very close to the topic. I personally, as a journalist for the last 30 years, was dealing with the climate change. So it's really, as Nina put it out, time for action despite some obstacles with this year facing COVID. But together with Terramata, we have been working since the beginning of the year to work out with the Austrian wildlife producers some sort of a charter for green producing, and we want to share with you the ideas and the perspectives how to make this reality. So we have a fantastic group of very, very experienced people with us, and we are eager to hear their ideas. So I think it's time for action. Nina, and I hand it over to you.
So I think it's time to, I gladly present our first speaker, Philipp Gassmann, who is a pioneer in green producing for many years already. And he continuously shares his knowledge in green film production, technology, storytelling, as well as green psychology and communication, giving talks and workshops all over Europe since 2013. And his clients include production companies, major TV channels, studios, networks, you name it, NGOs, and so on. And recently, he also developed the first certified curriculum for green experts and consultants for the film and TV industry in Germany, and which actually starts this winter. So may I welcome Philip onto the stage. Please give us an update of the status of green filmmaking in Europe and which resources are available there and how far the industry is in Europe. Hi, Philip.
Hi. Hi, Nina. Hi, Tom. Hi, everybody. I'm here in Munich, where the Oktoberfest is actually not taking place. That's why I'm here in my little studio, and I'm very happy to be able to just give you a little summary on things that are going on, mainly over here in Europe. And as Tom and Nina already mentioned, there's quite a lot of initiatives going on in terms of green production. And I'm actually really training people a lot on this topic, and the trainings now have extended from 1 day to a 5-day training. So I have squeezed these 5 days into 5 minutes, which is literally impossible, but I'll give it a try. And basically, I found today in my little warehouse an old bottle from the Boy Scouts of America that my father gave me 50 years ago. And I can resume pretty much all I'll be saying to 2 words: be prepared. And that's exactly what's written here on this little old bottle that brings up a lot of old memories. And just to make it very short, the interesting thing about film production, green production in general, is, first of all, it's going to be mandatory. It's going to be compulsory. That's already one good reason to be prepared. Because from what we see, there's so many TV channels now all over Europe who are working on guidelines, and these guidelines will mean that people who work for these TV channels have to produce their movies, have to produce their films in a sustainable manner. So this is a development that's increasing in speed for another very good reason, because the EU, our European Union, is actually working on what they're calling the Green New Deal. And they actually focused our industry quite a bit because our industry is growing. And as you all see, there's more and more networks, there's more and more production. It's a growing industry, which is great. But of course, the impact, the environmental impact of our industry is growing as well. And that's why all of a sudden, throughout these last years, people started to be a little alarmed and started saying, hey, we need to have a closer look on what's happening there. And that's the reason why now we're getting more and more into focus. And I know for a lot of people tend to say, well, documentaries are not such a big issue. It's more the fiction stuff that's a big issue. Well, on one hand, it's true. On the other hand, we also see that even with the documentaries, the technological side is increasing. We see bigger and bigger production. If we look at the BBC, basically at the BBC, one of their big documentaries was the biggest environmental impact at all compared with even the fiction sector. So we have to really be clear on that our sector is also producing quite a lot of issues, and that's why we need to work on that. So it's getting mandatory, it's getting compulsory, and there is another interesting thing, that film funding will also implement these sustainable guidelines in their rules. That's another reason to be prepared. Another reason to be aware of what you can actually do, because it might even increase the potential to get funding. I know several fundings in Europe where people have dealt it in such a way that basically people who say we're producing our movies, we're producing our documentaries in a more sustainable way, these people have better chances to sell their product. So that's another good reason to get closer to that, to check more what you can actually do. And one thing that to me is extremely important is to really talk about a sustainable system, sustainable management systems, in terms of really trying to make it as concrete, as clear, as organized as possible. And Nina mentioned it. We're working on, for instance, a CO2 calculator. We're working on a very clear system, easy system, that makes it easy for everybody to access to this kind of production and to really understand what it's all about. Because in the past, we've seen that people sometimes embarked on topics that were not really their biggest issues, not their biggest item or their biggest problem. So it's extremely important to have a clear focus on what is actually the problem, what are the biggest problems, what are the things that we can solve the best and that create the best environmental impact. So just to give you 4 little glimpses on the sustainability guidelines we're having now here in Europe with quite a lot of channels already. And you can clearly say focus number 1 is energy. So it's really about where is the energy coming from. So energy from renewable sources is becoming mandatory as well, which I think is a great thing because energy is still one of the big topics. Second, of course, is travel. Traveling does not only mean flights. I know people have been focused a lot on flying or on the flight issue, but what we see is cars, trucks, all these items have a big, huge environmental impact as well. And we have wonderful alternatives that we're diving into, that we work on, that we develop, that we incentivize, because here we have a big chance to reduce our emissions as well. Third, we're looking at hotels. Hotels, from what we learned, have a huge impact as well. Sometimes it's up to 30, 40, even 50% of the production. So it's very important to check, where are we actually staying? Do these hotels have an environmental program? Are they certified? Is there something happening there? And this can be a quick way to reduce emissions in a very, very, very big way. And fourth, we have a lot of wonderful new technologies for our filming that in fact are already green technologies. Of course, if we speak about that, one thing comes to mind immediately, that's LED. LED, beautiful tool, energy saver, you all know about that. But also when it's about energy in terms of generators, of energy storage, we're having beautiful tools that come into the market where we're able to even store solar energy in a very efficient way with which we can, again, have our LEDs working. And these are wonderful things, especially for people who are working outdoors, who are working in remote locations, so that basically there they can basically manufacture their own energy so they're able to work independently and do their productions. So in a whole, what we see over here, and that is my little message at the very end, is it's not only about ecology, it's also about economy. And that's the last, and I think very important thing that we learned, that green production is also a wonderful way to reduce costs. And that has been somewhat the big key here, to open many, many doors when people understood it's not only about ecology, it's also about economy. And of course, it's also about creativity, because we see that we have a lot of new green tools that also enhance creativity and help us to do better movies. So that was a quick, very quick introduction in what we're actually doing. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. So thank you for this overview about the European situation. As Philip and Nina mentioned, we try to build up a coalition within Europe with all our partners in the nature wildlife business, because this is a big family, and I think we are very close to the topic. And as well as we as the ORF, together with the public broadcasters, for example, with ZDF, the big German broadcaster. But if we come to our next guest, Katie Carpenter, she is a wildlife and a science filmmaker who has been involved in the topic of green producing for a very, very long time. So for a very long time, she is engaged in this. And she has been producing environmental documentaries for Nat Geo and Discovery Channel for 20 years. Two of her films, Ocean Warriors and Battle for the Elephant, won at Jackson, and she co-founded the Green Production Guide with other members of the Producers Guild 12 years ago. So it's a very long time with a lot of experience that we want to share with you. Now backed by 11 major film and TV studios, their carbon calculator, green vendor list, and original guidelines are in use around the country. Their goal, reduce carbon, conserve water, and redirect waste. So the the first question that I would have is seeing how long you're working on this. How long does it take to convince broadcasters, companies, producers to get into this action? I mean, what is your experience in that?
Thank you, Tom. And can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you
Great.
very.
All right. Well, thanks, Tom. Thanks, Nina. And thanks, Philip. I'm going to come take that training program. That sounds like fun. So I would say, I mean, Lisa and the folks at Jackson are amazing to put this together. First of all, I think it's long overdue, and I think we can really, you know, by getting everybody talking about this, we can do a lot. And I'm very grateful that they're giving us this time. It has been a pretty rough road for us, I will say. We started in, I did my climate training in 2007 in Nashville. We set this up in 2008 in the Producers Guild. We had 3 producers on the East Coast and 3 producers on the West Coast working on it. We knew we weren't going to get any traction unless we had partners who were actually within the producing establishment. So we were very fortunate. We had NBC Universal as our first partner, and they helped bring in 5 other studios. So for many years, we had 6 studio partners. And I'm happy to say that this year we have 11. Amazon just joined, and Netflix last year. So we're now expanding into the realm of other partners who can also bring a lot to the experience. But I think our challenge from the very beginning was, in the first year we produced our carbon calculator, and we used the carbon calculator on the production of a few films that first year. One was directed by Sam Mendes, and it was a very high profile project. And I think what happened is we kind of scared people. A carbon calculator actually takes note of everything that you're doing that produces. And we use it through the budget software. So the budget software is like there's a little box. You know, what are the carbon emissions that are produced here? Or is this a green production activity? And I think in a way it was too precise. So when we backed off a little bit and we said, okay, we actually have 3 goals, and see what you can do on any one of these 3. One is reducing carbon, one is conserving water, and one is redirecting waste. Literally recycling and composting will get you points for this. And then I feel like that kind of opened up the door a little bit so that more people could come in and they could participate. What happened this year is really extraordinary. In March, all production was shut down on the 15th of March, and our committee was pulled together again, this time with another union, the Writers Guild. And we were asked to put together a return to work guidelines that would qualify for all film and TV companies, but would incorporate sustainability recommendations. And that was super hard. I had no idea how hard that was going to be. First of all, try to do a bi-weekly conference call with 18 people. I don't care who they are. It's hard. So we were meeting twice a week for 3 months. And we were writing them line by line on the phone. It was kind of incredible. And when it was done, we released them on July 9th. You know, it was just better. It was something we should have done long before. And what we realized was that we're in a world right now with overlapping calamities. We can't just focus on climate change. We have to look at a pandemic. We now have to talk about health and safety and equality all in one sentence, or else it's not really worth it. So we were careful to include as many of the things that we thought were doable and also beneficial for productions in those guidelines. And those are up on our website now, greenproductionguide.com. At the top it says return to work guidelines, and that's where these guidelines are written. We've also been writing articles about productions who do achieve some part of this. I mean, and some of it is crazy. The last article I wrote was about the movie Call of the Wild with Harrison Ford. And their big accomplishment was that they had a hydro team. It was kind of the first time we'd ever seen it. They had 16 guys with camelbacks, enormous tanks on their backs, and they were delivering water. They were the water system, because they were shooting a movie that was set in Alaska, in Southern California, and it was hot, and everybody was standing around in fur coats, and they had to, you know, people who are coming up with solutions like this, we applaud them, no matter which part of that environmental benefit spectrum that we're working on. So I think, you know, when you go to our website, you'll see it now says, as we return to work, it's imperative to acknowledge the connections between climate change, the pandemic, and inequality These are crises which share both causes and consequences. And now in the package that we give to new productions that are starting at the beginning, all digital, of course, it says that at the beginning. And it says that it's protect, yes, health of the planet, but really human health as well. So I just want to say one thing, which is it's not as hard as you think. This year we had to do the Emma Awards virtually, but we had lots of TV productions and movies that made the cut. Here are just a few: Call of the Wild, Dark Waters. I don't know if you saw that. That was produced green. Chernobyl, an unbelievable miniseries. And Madam Secretary, which is a weekly series. And in the docs area, The Story of Plastic won an Emma Award this year, and so did Disney Nature's Elephant. So that was a big production, as we know, but they were able to reduce their carbon emissions and conserve water and redirect some of their waste. There's some newcomers to the list. This year we gave an award to Activate, which is a very cool series that covers natural history and science. For kids, PBS's Nature Cats won a Green Award. And I love this. Shark Tank won an award. Okay, this had no sharks or natural history or oceans or anything. This is a business show. But they kept their production as green as they could. So you can find out more about this on our website, greenproductionguide.com, and also EMMA, which is the Environmental Media Association. And I think the US, in some ways, we still have quite a ways to go. I would say Europe is ahead of us. I think Albert at the BBC is ahead of us. But we're pulling ourselves in other ways that are culturally appropriate. They aren't too, punitive. And people, I think even this year, in this year of overlapping calamities, people are really, catching on. So thank you for extending the conversation, and I hope we can keep doing this.
Thank you, Katie. And we actually just got a question in, so maybe you want to answer this. I'll just read it to you. Is the switch to a more sustainable alternatives in filmmaking more a matter of lack of trust in moving into a new system, past inertia, or a matter of economics? I think we partly read.
All right, well, it depends on who you're talking to, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I give a lot of credit to Discovery Channel, who do these things even when they don't make monetary sense. But some of the biggest studios, they will always look for something that will cost less. If you drive your hybrids around for more than 3.5 weeks, then the fuel savings will pay for the extra cost of the hybrid. So you look for the things that will pay for themselves, or maybe save you some money, like LEDs. Yay, go LEDs. So yes, there's always a way to, there are elements of this that can help you save money, but not all of them do. Some of them you just have to do out of passion.
Thank you, Katie. Okay, so our next guest is Larry Engel, who is not only a professor at the American University, but has nearly 40 years of teaching and filmmaking experience. And his documentaries appear on PBS, Discovery, Geographic, among many other outlets. And in 2009, he partnered with the UK producer Andrew Buchanan to publish the Code of Best Practices for Sustainable Filmmaking. And they actually had met for the first time 2 years earlier at the Jackson Hole Wildlife Film Festival. And this code is based on a global survey in best practices in sustainable filmmaking and involved more than 175 filmmakers and companies. And this code was actually also later translated into German by Katja Schwarz. And at the moment, he has started a nonprofit consulting company called Net Zero. And they actually also created a certification for the film industry, much like LEED. I don't know if everybody knows this is kind of like coming from the architecture engineering side. And they plan on calling this certification LEAF, so Leadership for Environmental Activism and Film. We are really excited to hear more about all of this. Maybe first I would also like to know, because Larry, you're also a filmmaker yourself, how hard it was or is to implement your own tools and guidelines in your daily work.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for hosting this, and thanks to Lisa and the gang for bringing green filmmaking to a serious place at the table. 10, 11 years in the making since we first published our code for best practices in sustainable filmmaking. And I didn't find out that the code had been translated to German until earlier this year. And I'm just so pleased that Europe's picked up the code of best practices a bit more than here in the US, but it's a simple set of principles and monitoring. Also in the UK, Jessica Edwards of the Doc Society adapted the code. They trialed it a couple years last year on 2 short docs. The producers loved working with it. And now they're about to come out with a brand new checklist that's based on the work that Andrew and I did. There's no copyright. And we intentionally did not have a copyright so that you could adapt, use, and make it work for your production, your system, your government, your team. And how hard was it? I ended up practicing what I was preaching in 2010 when I had a small grant, $75,000 grant, to do a film about potatoes and potato seed banks. And I used our spreadsheet and our code, and I determined that based on our efforts to be sustainable, we actually saved $5,000 out of that $75,000 on pre-production and production. And we were able to put it back into post-production for color grading and audio mix. So I think that the key to going sustainable, essentially, is really getting buy-in from everybody. I mean, we live on one planet, and so we know with climate change that it has to be a global action, right? And it's bottom up and it's top down. So I think that the easiest thing to do is to start thinking about where is waste and what's important in terms of the ethics of production. Ultimately, economics doesn't, in most of our systems, account for carbon footprints, and it should. So I think that it's a mindset and an action plan that buys in from smallest to large. I have my students at American University use the code because they're our future. And I want students around the country and around the world to use it as well. So I'm putting a call out to the Jackson community. Please take the code and translate it into your language, adapt it, reach out to me. I'll be happy to consult. So a couple things that I think that are still missing, and I want to emphasize what Katie has said, and that is that it's sometimes an uphill battle in the United States, clearly, but it can be done. I think that more festivals should invest in categories of green production. I think that there should be an acknowledgement. I want to adapt the code to include issues of economic justice and racism so that we better include local communities in our film production, so that when we go somewhere, we may have the opportunity to train people in different parts of the world on how to be sound recorders, on how to be camera operators, especially in this virtual world. I think it's part of our obligation of living in white privilege. I also think I want to touch on the idea of certification. A filmmaker whom I met last year at Jackson by the name of Davis Huber and I are developing this nonprofit, and we think that it would be better for it to be affiliated with something like the PGA's Green Initiative that Katie developed, or the Jackson Hole Wild Summit and Festival, so that there would be weight to the certification and consulting process. I think that I want to include updates to the code to include the use of drones, rechargeable batteries, cameras, and other stabilizing gear. And I also think that it's going to be really important to have, in a way, an app that makes it easy for a production manager, line producer, or somebody, whoever the sustainability officer is, to be able to track in a simple way what our impact is on the climate and other species, including our brethren humans.
Thank you, Larry. Actually, I also have a question for you now. Do you know if the code has been adapted for wildlife TV films especially? Like, do you know of anything like this?
I think that I don't know specifically, but I do know that the code is the basis for so much of the work that you all are doing in Austria and Germany. And so I have to get in touch with Katja, see what she knows about that. But I don't feel that wildlife filmmaking, environmental filmmaking, social documentary is terribly distinguishable. I think that when we do expedition work, we live on leave no trace. And I think it should be the same situation when it comes to wildlife. I think it's being mindful and being ethical about how we're treating other species where they live.
Thank you, Larry. May I add that I think this is the goal also of this Jackson Wild initiative, to adapt these inputs to have a solid base how to work as a wildlife filmmaker. But I can tell from our experience that especially the wildlife filmmakers themselves take a lot of care about their footprints. So normally they work in very, very small teams. They try to get in local expertise. They rely on, as we mentioned yesterday, on different teams in different countries. So, for example, I think this Lisa is working on a database of experienced wildlife creative people around the world, so that we can especially reduce the number of flights it takes to make a big film. And it has also a social aspect. But I think especially wildlife filmmakers are very aware of that. And I'm now happy to present you our next guest, Melanie Haft. Thank you, Larry. See you later then. Melanie Haft and her husband Jan are owners of Nautilus Film in Germany. They are very well-known, awarded filmmakers, and of course they are passionate about the issue of green producing. And hello, Melanie.
Hello, everyone.
Glad to have you here. And I think within the discussions, it's also especially for small production companies, it's a matter of resources. Are they able to do it in a green way? So I think this will be the question that all the filmmakers in the room will ask us. And what are your experiences in this field?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. We've been thinking about wildlife filmmaking in a green way for quite a long time. We have 3 children and we have to be role models. So first, our job is with our filmmaking to be some sort of example for everybody, how we work. People watch what we do. And so we thought, for a couple of years, what can we do to give back to our protagonist nature? So we decided to build biotopes on our land firstly. And since 2 years, we've been buying into moor and wetland futures, which are provided here in Germany, where organizations buy land and give it back to nature, take it out of agricultural use, re-wet it so that it stores more carbon dioxide, and that you can buy as many futures as you think appropriate. And we decided to judge on the budgets we have and to just give a certain percentage of our budgets straight to these initiatives so that they can sort of compensate upfront before we actually put out the climate changing gases, that they start working on these biotopes and re-wet the land. So these Moor Futures are things we've been doing voluntarily for a couple of years because we think we have to take action before things are too late and before there is any mandatory things we have to do. We wish it was mandatory. We wish it was mandatory for commissioners as well as for producers, because we think this world we live off, wildlife out there, it's there for free, sort of, and we film it and we make a living of it. So it should be sort of completely natural that we have to give back right at this moment when we start gaining from it. And this is something we've been doing for quite a while. And we were at the Berlinale in February this year and have been working on an award at the Berlinale for green filmmaking that's going to be sponsored by Heinz Simon Stiftung here in Germany, to give back to these productions. And you don't have to be a big theatrical film to apply for this award. So everybody who has a good idea, everybody who can compensate, everybody who works on green production and can actually prove to make a change with their work can apply for this award. So this is just a small drop on a very hot stone, but it's something that sort of might help to even work greener in the end. So we've been doing this for quite a while, and yes, to answer your question, I think it's possible for everybody, even for small productions, to go green and to start giving back. So I have not prepared a big speech because I thought this was something you were going to ask and see what we do, and we've been doing it for quite a while. And we think if there's some, what I would suggest would be great if there was some sort of list of projects that are labeled green, where you can, as a producer, give a certain amount of money or work or whatever to, so that your production can be labeled green, because you actually give back to nature and you actually work on sustainable projects with those people.
I can tell you from our side as a broadcaster, we're working together also with the Austrian government to have a certificate, especially also for documentary filmmakers or wildlife filmmakers, just to give them the opportunity to show a sign of them. Of course, we will also support some awards. What I will be interested in from your experience out in the field, for example, one point is that we want to avoid plastic. And I want to avoid waste. Of course, within Europe, within the Alps, it's easy because we work under more or less controlled conditions. How is it if you are shooting far away, let's say in Central Africa or in South America? Do you have any advice or any experience with that issue?
Well, we haven't been shooting in Africa for 10 years. We had the last film on another continent was in the United States. What we do is we prepare our teams up front. Anywhere we go, if we go to Norway or if we go to Spain or if we go to any other part of Europe where we try to focus on working, because we are locals and we try to avoid these big travels. We have a certain amount of gear and also stuff we take with us on the car if we can, or on the plane, or that we provide in the country where we work. And they don't have to use plastic. They don't have to use one-way cups, because they have their reusable cups. They have the whole gear they can cook with, they can work with, and if they're staying in a hide for a couple of days, they all have their reusable stuff. So it's not really something we think about, because it's just all, we have the camera gear and we have the everyday use gear, and they just take it with them. So it's not something that we discuss, it's just there. We've been doing this for years. And so we don't have to train them, because it's just a part of how we work. It's not something we have to talk about because it's been done like this for forever.
Thank you very much for all these points. I think one point we should then discuss with all the other experts. It's the point of compensations as a mean of green production. You mentioned it before, but I give over to Nina.
Yeah, and we also got another question, which would also be interesting, I guess, for somebody to answer, like in a bigger group. Yeah, as for compensation, we also had the same kind of topics, obviously, calculating our CO2 footprint. And like everybody else, we kind of realized, okay, mobility is like a huge topic for us, and the flights which we just can't reduce, we really should compensate. And we're actually working with a university in Vienna together to compensate in a kind of forest project, deforestation. So it should also be something which is closer, but there's like so many ways to compensate. And to start with, I think it's also kind of important to have like a shared standards, which are like easy to read. And also for people who have never heard about this whole topic, that it's easy for everybody to get into. Yeah, should we kind of choose someone to, because the question is, can the impacts of a production be quantified in a way that a credit system similar to carbon credit systems be implemented to offset certain aspects of the production? Not sure. I don't know if Tom wants to answer this, or Katie. Like, no problem.
No, I think Katie would be very. It's very good if you can bring in your experience on.
I'd be happy to talk about it. Larry, looking at each other because we've been trying to do this for so long. You know, the United States doesn't have a great track record in terms of like carbon taxes. For some reason, it's that home rule thing. People just don't want to be incentivized in that way. So what we do, I think generally what we do is we create systems that will allow people to be incentivized in kind. And I'm thinking, I don't know if Lisa Day is coming on to another panel. I know she was involved in the planning for this panel. Lisa Day works for Fox, and she has, you know, she does gifting to her well, Greenwise. And we went out and wrote an article and filmed a location in Jekyll Island, Georgia, which had been you know, negatively impacted by the production. And Lisa said, but that production did such a good job in every other way, I'm going to go clean it up. And she spent $400,000 cleaning up this beach, restoring the botany of it and everything, because everybody wants to do it, but we're constrained by what our budgets will allow. So we film a lot in Tanzania. It's super hard to find a hybrid vehicle in Tanzania. You probably know this. We start 3 months out, 6 months out. We're talking to the fixer. Please, can you go? Find somebody who has a hybrid. Actually, we need two, and they need to be big enough, and we got to put the tripod out the back. And, you know, it just takes a little bit of extra time. And if you can put in that time, invest that time, and let everybody know that this is a priority for you, then I feel that, and again, I'm going to mention Discovery because Clark Bunting in the early days of all of this said, we're going to set up some guidelines here and we're going to find a way to incentivize you. And it never took the form of carbon credits or points or money. It took the form of, you're going to get access to something you wouldn't have had access to because I'm going to make that happen. So we need to create a system that doesn't require more money. We're going to run out of money. We got all these overlapping calamities. We do not have enough money to pay for all of it. We have to find other ways to incentivize each other. I want Larry on my next production. Actually, Larry and I have already done a production together once, long ago.
Yes, we have. Yeah, listen, I'll be happy to PA for you. Don't worry about it.
No, but I mean, we'll do it tit for tat someday, where you'll work for our thing and we'll work for your thing. And, you know, we have got to find other ways that aren't money, sound like tax.
We actually have exceeding questions about this as well. Does making a green production typically increase or decrease your overall budget of the firm? So there's really
there is no typical, right? There's no
It depends.
typical.
It just depends. I mean,
but
generally,
including a lot of us, I just want to say this one thing, which is, So like, why haven't you written guidelines for wildlife documentaries? People are always asking us that. And I'm like, because we're sleeping in a tent for 6 weeks. We're like, we are so light on the landscape already. If there was more that we could do, we would certainly do it. And I welcome whatever guidelines come in that direction for sure.
I think I would change the question a little bit and not talk about the issue of money, but the issue of carbon, because carbon costs, and we know this. So Kaja told me on her first test case in her production company in 2011 or 12, they did their carbon tracking, and they determined that by following the code or whatever, our code, what doesn't matter, but by following your carbon conscience, she was able to prove that they'd reduced their carbon impact by 42%. That's nearly half of what was the output. So, and I think things have only improved since, in terms of the carbon economics. I think that's the key.
You're so right. Actually, the recognition is a part of it too. It's like money, right? I mean, when the studios finally agreed to release the carbon footprint of films, they could only do it, we thought you were going to have 1,100 metric tons of carbon, but you only had 972. Therefore, you reduced by this amount. That feels good, and they were positively reinforced by their colleagues. So I think you're right, Larry. It's going to have to take the form of carbon currency.
Yeah, we experience like similar things. That's why we're also planning to implement a COT calculator into our workflow, because this already makes you think of, okay, how can I reduce there and this thing, and kind of makes the whole workflow completely different and more sustainable.
Pre-production scouting, if you can go to a location and scout, that's great. So you go to a production and scout it in terms of climate impact. And it's just part, and as Melanie said, it's just part of the way you work and you do business. It's not something that gets added or, gets just do it.
Right. That's exactly the idea. I think if we talk too much and if we have too many difficulties in understanding rules and guidelines, we waste so much time. Why not just use your common sense and say, okay, I'm going to be traveling a lot and I'm going to be doing things I wouldn't usually do. Let's just compensate upfront. Let's just talk to our partners. We're going to have to do something if we do this, and it's mandatory. It's not something we can do if we feel like it. It's just there.
Totally agree.
Philip can add something from the European perspective.
Sure.
I think we all know that there are different ways. I think reducing of flights will be a key element. So, Philip, what are you thinking about that?
Well, of course, the flight issue is a huge one, where we are not so able to change a lot about it. And the issue of compensation has been mentioned already. When it comes to other productions, we're also talking about remote production tools that seem to work better and better and better. I had a very interesting discussion last week with the EBU, the European Broadcast Union. And basically, we're getting better and better with these things. And sometimes when we just think about the amount of travels sometimes are involved for post-production, pre-production, all these things, I think there's quite a big potential in there to improve these workflows as well. And there as well, there's a lot of money to save in there. And I think we have to kind of change our mindset quite a bit, I think. And that to me, when I look at all the workshops that I'm doing, the teaching, I see the first thing that needs to happen is here. It's the most important thing. And to get people into this kind of a perspective, or what Larry and Katie have been saying, to get also this feeling, what is really important, what does really have an impact on what we're doing. And I've been counseling a big German TV channel the last months, and basically we boiled it down to 11 guidelines. 11, that's it. because we knew these 11 guidelines are the most important ones. The fact is, I'll give you a few examples. The fact is they were able to reduce, by following these guidelines, they were able to reduce their CO2 emissions by over 90% on quite a few productions. And they called me up and they said, hey, Philip, we never believed it would be so easy. That, which was the biggest compliment for me, because that's exactly what we need. We need easy solutions. We need something that people comprehend immediately. And I think their numbers do help. I was very bad in maths at school, but I understood when you talk to a producer, when you talk to a TV channel, and you come up with numbers, that helps a lot. You know, if you tell them, yes, we've been a little more sustainable, well, they'll say, well, what does it mean? But if you say, okay, we've been able to reduce our emissions by 50%, or we've been able to doing this and this, and we can quantify it perfectly, it makes us a lot more credible. And I think that is another very important issue. We need to become more credible. We need to become more comprehensible and make things easier. I think that is really the key.
Yeah, I was just going to add one thing, and it's a statement and a question for you as well back, which is that when we were doing the green production program inside NBC Universal, at Green is Universal, they actually forgot to show me the book we wrote. We wrote a book.
I know, it's a great book.
That was cool. Right. So that was cool, right? But what happened next was so surprising. They said, okay, you guys, you did a good job. Now, the aerospace division of GE is upstairs. Okay. Can you work on that? Now, of course, the carbon footprint of our division was, 10,000 metric tons a year. Their division was like millions. And the idea that the person, not me, but the person who was head of Green is Universal could go back and forth between the two floors and actually influence an industry that large. Mm-hmm. That was like, yeah, that's why we're doing this, right? We're film and TV. We message. People read in our credits that we ran a sustainable production, and we told them something that maybe will inspire them the next time they're doing something that's carbon intensive. So I think that not only do we need to become credible and comprehensible, but we need to harness our potential to be influential.
Yes.
And let other people know. In Germany, do they catch on from you and say, oh, I can do that too? And it's like,
yes, there is quite a lot of buzz going back and forth now, between different industries. And very good point. I always emphasize, we are basically creating influences. We're creating also meaning. We're creating messages. And it's very, very funny because this green issue somewhat was a little tainted. People got a little bit tired of it. Again, there's green issue, sustainability, how boring. So we also need to work on the storytelling. That's the next thing. I'm really working a lot on this. I'm teaching a lot in universities, and I tell people, let us find better ways to tell this story. Let us find more fun ways to do this, more entertaining ways to do this. We're storytellers, and I think that is another very, very important issue. The storytelling has to become better, our storytelling.
I totally agree with that.
Partly connected to this is another question we have, have you considered not getting the perfect shot to produce greener? For example, do you really need a big car to get the shot? So this is also, for example, connected to the green storytelling. And I don't know if you also want to answer this.
We have drones. We don't need that big car anymore. We got drones.
Yeah, but I also
figure out how to do drones.
I love drones. But anyway, in 2018, I went to the Ecuadorian Amazon to do a short film about 3 indigenous people's struggles against the Ecuadorian government and big mining and big oil. And I consciously made the choice to take a GoPro and my iPhone. So in terms of getting the shot, I didn't have long lenses. I didn't have, the weight of big production, but I made a 28-minute film that premiered at last year's Washington, D.C. based environmental filmmaking festival. And it also aired in the San Francisco Latino Film Festival. And so I think that being mindful across the board of the production techniques, the mentality, the storytelling, the messaging, and the acknowledgement. That's why we like the idea of an equivalent of a LEEDS certificate that says you did a good job. You were mindful of the planet. So I think that all of that has to be integrated. I wish that we would have a simple app or checklist instead of 4 or 5, or each. My understanding is
I
that
think we only have a couple more minutes left. There's another question regarding Corona. How can we reduce the negative impact of Corona? Do we have to expect a lot of masks and plastic gloves swimming soon in the ocean? It's a good question. Already Corona is used in defense of not greening productions.
yeah, it's a problem. So virtual
We did,
production.
that's why we did our guidelines, the combo guidelines, sustainability return to work recommendations on the greenproductionguide.com. And it's like, how do you recycle, PPE and what kind of masks to use that can be either recycled or, turned into something else. And, how to disinfect a hybrid. That gets the message out both ways. It's super hard. There's no question. People are struggling. We've only just gone back to work. I mean, Bull was the first weekly series in our country to go back to work, and it just went back 2 weeks ago. And those of us who sneak around and make documentaries, on the fly, we're fine. We never stopped. But the big productions, really, they have a ways to go. And I do worry, but the pandemic comes first. But if we can find a way to make shows, forever that are healthy and sustainable, that should be the goal.
And
rental houses are using.
Excuse me, but I think sustainability does not have to be put on the same spot as being something very unfun. It can be fun to work sustainable. I mean, it's not a problem. Everybody tells you it's a problem. It doesn't have to be a problem. It can be a lot of fun to just go out there and be aware of what you're doing, and then just make the right decisions rather than the wrong ones. And it's not so difficult. Once you got the gist, it's not hard. It's just different.
I think we should agree to Melanie. That we are a community of nature wildlife filmmakers, and I think we are aware of the problem. I think what this panel also should do is show solutions and create awareness and show and encourage all of us to do something. I mean, that's the main issue. So I think, like Melanie put it out, it sounds like there is a lot of difficulties, but I think we can overcome them.
Right.
Yeah. Also, virtual production is a thing that didn't really exist until COVID, and now rental houses, across our country are sending gear out with computers that allow for DP to remotely direct out of New York a 4-day shoot in Paris. So there's all sorts of synergies. And I also thought that Melanie was spot on when in a way, I think we're not just storytellers, but we're also problem solvers.
Right.
And, that's so important.
We're
so
creative,
let's all of us work together.
Yeah.
I think I have one more last question. So it's what's left on the cutting room floor? So many beautiful shots not used. Surely we should all be recycling with each other. Yeah, good point. Maybe Melanie or
Yeah, well, we actually, I think, we work together. So yeah, we're recycling our stuff a lot.
No, but in fact, I think this comes very close to the idea of our network and our database. So I think we have already created and established a big community, and I think we can use this community to go further on, either with working together with experts in different countries to avoid our flights and to reduce carbon in mobility, but also exchange of footage if it's possible. So I think what we have is a really big chance because we have the same ideals.
Right.
Yeah, if you need anything filmed in Washington, D.C., let me know.
Yes.
Same
So
for
if you need
Germany and Central
something to film,
that's what we should do.
come to us.
Right.
Promise.
Nina, I think we can thank you all for this wonderful discussion. I hope we created a lot of impact, and let's go on.
Yeah, this hour was going by so fast. Thank you everybody for taking the time, and thank you for everybody listening in to this Action Coalition Forum. And also thanks again to the whole Jackson team who was setting this up. And yeah, I hope this last hour will trigger further discussions in this direction. And it's also important to have more people on board and aware of this important topic so things can move into a more sustainable future way faster. With this being said, those of you who still have time now can meet us in the lobby for a small group discussion. And thanks everybody. Enjoy your rest of your day, evening, wherever you are, and talk soon.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
Thank you everybody.